Good afternoon. Who cares about new domain names? The short answer is we think you should, and we certainly do too. And actually, this is the most important and I think an exciting change in the internet in a long, long time, maybe since the beginning of the modern internet as we knew it, at least as users will experience it. And we are incredibly excited about this. And if that is not enough, if our excitement and the changes in the internet aren't enough to get you excited, we're going to give each and every one of you a free domain name registration to use soon as part of our new domain registrar business. So hang on till the end to learn more about that. I hope that that helps excite you about the topic a little bit. Yay, free! Free is good. Domain names actually cost more than t-shirts, even in bulk, so you're getting a good deal. I'm Ben Fried. I'm Google's Chief Information Officer. I'll be joined on stage later by Kripa, and during the Q&A, Corey's going to come and join us as well. So just out of curiosity, how many of you manage a domain, have a domain under management? Oh, all right, awesome. How many manage more than 10 domains? How many of you manage more than 50? You're an impressive bunch. You certainly out-domain manage me. OK, and so you're clearly experts, so this is material that you didn't need to hear, but just to set expectations for the broader audience. What's in a name? Obviously, names are locations. They're how we find things on the internet. They're what make the web nameable and usable. They're incredibly important. The key components that we're going to be talking about in names are that stuff to the right of the last dot is called the top-level domain. .com is an example of what's called a generic top-level domain. There are also country code top-level domains, like .us, for example. Google is the second-level domain here, obviously, in the site name google.com. Keep those terms in mind if you didn't already know them. It's very important. So, but why are we talking about domain names? Why do we care about them? What makes them important in our lives? And the answer is that domain names are the key to making the internet work for us. What's important about names is that they need to be readable. You need to understand the location, the address of the place that you want to go. Domain names also need to be memorable. It does you no good to have a location or a place that you want to go if you can't remember it in the future. And finally, names, as in all things in life, names work best when they're meaningful to us and actually kind of convey something that's important to us. But it's no secret to this group of experts that as the internet has matured, something has happened to names. Finding meaningful names has become a lot harder. And when I try to explain this to friends and family, I go to that oracle of the internet, Jack Donaghy, the character played by Alec Baldwin in 30 Rock. And here's a quote from the television show, 30 Rock. I just registered the domain name for my campaign website. Jack Donaghy is running for mayor 2013 in New York. This is the website.com. That's as close as I could get. Everything else was already pornography. So how did we get here? How did we get to the point where a broadcast primetime comedy can actually be telling us something we all relate to about the exhaustion of names on the internet? You actually have to go back and put this in context. In 1985, when the modern internet naming was created, there were 7 top-level domains. And in fact, the very first name registered, which was in .com, was symbolics.com, which was owned by the Symbolics Computer Corporation. But over the next, I guess, 29 years, we've seen over 240 million domain names registered in the second-level domain space. And the result is the situation that Jack described. Or to give you more color on it, and I think this is probably obvious to all of you, of the almost 460,000 four-letter .com domain names that are possible, there are none that are available. So we're out. Is it any secret to any of us that we're out of names? Finding names is awfully hard. Anyway, I guess the good thing to know is that we've known this problem was important for a long time. There's an organization called ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, whose mandate it is in part to worry about naming on the internet. And they've been worried about this problem since 2000. And in fact, in 2000 and then in 2004, ICANN created a total of 15 new generic top-level domains. But whether considered as experiments, those worked or didn't, I don't think they really changed the naming crisis that we have on the internet. And I imagine all of you would agree. So in 2011, as you can see here in this picture, ICANN voted to open up the top-level domain namespace and allow any applicant to suggest and apply for a new top-level domain. And that has actually happened. So Over 1,400 new top-level domain names have been approved and are working their way into the namespace. In fact, there have been over 1 million registrations in the new top-level domains since ICANN opened this program. So the other important thing to understand is, unlike those prior 15 new top-level domains, there are tons of important interests that are invested in making these new top-level domains successful. Companies, not just Google, but lots of companies that you've all heard about, for whom top-level domains are an incredibly important part of their strategy. And even cities like New York, London, and Berlin are getting into the top-level domain business. So it's really, really likely that we're going to see, incredibly likely, it's a given, I think, that we're going to see new names on the internet. And I think it's, we'll be talking to our children or our friends' children one day and laughing about the days when there was only 7 top-level domains, and when it was finding a meaningful name in .com was incredibly hard. So anyway, when ICANN created this program, we, Google, decided to get involved. We care deeply about the internet. The web is incredibly important to us, and naming and location and finding things on the web is at the heart of what we think our mission is. So that was why we created a new business, Google Registry. Now let me tell you a little bit about how this business works. In the world of naming, there are 3 participants in the naming business. The first is a registry. You can think of it as a factory that creates and manages top-level domains, but they're kind of the top-level domain factory. Then there are registrars. These are the storefronts, the businesses that sell second-level domains in top-level domains made by registries to the public. And we call the public registrants in this case. So registries create top-level domains. Registrars sell names in those top-level domains, and registrants purchase those top-level domains. And as I said, Google last year launched a new business, Google Registry, which is built on App Engine, by the way. We run on the Google Cloud platform, and it provides the infrastructure for powering our top-level domains. And in fact, as part of that ICANN process, we applied for about 100 new top-level domains. And these top-level domains, as you can see if you look at the list on the screen, reflect a variety of potential business models that we think are going to emerge in the world of this new top-level domain namespace. So we have a bunch of cases of things that are Google brands or Google products, and you can clearly understand what their relationship is to us and why we might do them. And then all the way on the other extreme, from things like Android and Chrome and Google as top-level domains, all the way on the other extreme, we have things like .dad or .lol or .meme, more whimsical things where we're looking at other ways of using domain names to light up entirely new ways of interacting with the internet. Now, as it turns out, other applicants, there are other parties who are interested in some of these top-level domains. Google may not end up in possession of all of these, but this was our intent, and that this is where we started. So, not only did we think it was important as the DNS namespace, as the top-level domain namespace was expanding, did we think it was important to create a registry and new top-level domains, but it made us think hard about the experience of getting online, what it's always been like, what it will be like, what we would like it to be like. And we realized that that moment of bringing your business online, bringing yourself online, acquiring a domain name, managing a domain, these are incredibly important experiences in the lives of our customers. And we wanted Google to be a part of that. Not only that, we wanted to make sure that Google could provide an experience to people buying domain names that was a Google experience, that was one where we thought we could set the bar for what the user experience and the quality of that experience would be. And that was why we've launched a new business, Google Domains, which is a registrar which will sell domains to the public, to registrants. And these are not just new top-level domains that we'll sell, not just Google top-level domains, but as many as possible, the historic top-level domains that we all know about, and as many of the 1,400 new top-level domains that are coming online as we can sell. So we think that this registrar is going to do a lot to help us make the new names more meaningful. But let me tell you a little bit about the other features that are coming in the registrar in Google Domains. And I should point out that we've announced this as a new business, but we're not feature complete yet. We're in a limited access beta period. I'll tell you how to get a free code. Soon I'll tell you how to get a free code so you can register a new domain name or transfer an existing domain name to Google Domains. But we're not feature complete. We're still in beta. And it's invite-only beta, as I mentioned. But here are some of the things that we think are important about what our registrar does. First of all, as I said, it's a Google experience, and I think it's one that you'll recognize the signposts of with relation to other Google products. Secondly, we want to make things simple and transparent. So, for example, we're going to build in the pricing for private registration, for example. We're going to build in all the features that you expect in one price for the domains that you want to register. We're going to want to make it incredibly easy to find a name that's meaningful to you, and we're using technology from Google's Knowledge Graph to help you find domain names in the top-level domains that you care about that are meaningful to what you're trying to search for. So we're going to help you find names that you want to acquire, help you acquire those names, help you transfer names in, help you manage them. And if you want to, we'll make it easy for you to transfer the names away from us if you decide you don't like us as a registrar. We're going to give you live customer support. During the beta period, that support is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. But you'll be able to actually talk to a person to get answers to any problems you have with your registration. And another thing that's important to mention is this is the same infrastructure that we use for our own services. So we think it sets an incredibly high bar for reliability, security, and performance. So we've also decided it was really important to launch with partners who can make it really, really easy for you to create a great website. And so many people want to get on the web in the first place to create a website. So we've done very, very deep integration with 4 partners, Shopify, Squarespace, Weebly, and Wix, to give Google Domains customers the option of easily working with and using these companies' products for the sites that they're creating through the domains they purchased through Google Domains, the registrar. We worked really hard to make the integration of the registration experience and the experience working with the site builder incredibly simple. It's a really deep integration. It's going to make it really, really easy to use. Of course, I should mention that use of these companies' products is available at an additional cost beyond that of acquiring your domain name. But as I said, this is a beta. It's an early invite-only beta, and we've gone about as far as we can go by just testing the registrar on our colleagues and ourselves. And this is why we're moving to an invite-only beta period, because we want data. Apologies to Brent Spiner. I doubt he's in the audience or watching us on YouTube, but Brent, apologies. We want data. We want your feedback about the registrar. I'll remind you once more, we're still not feature complete, but we really want to hear what you think of this experience. So, as I said, to help you get started, feedback is so important to us. Every Google I/O attendee will get 1 free domain name to acquire or to transfer into Google Domains. You'll get an email soon with more information about that. I'll tell you more about the email sign-up process flow soon. So we're really excited to get your feedback to help us make this a great product. Now, kind of as a transition, 1,400 new top-level domains are being created in the world right now. And although we're really excited about what this means for solving the problems of domain name exhaustion or domain namespace exhaustion, unfortunately, there's an awful lot of code out there that is about to break as a result of going from a very small number of top-level domains to a very, very large number of top-level domains. And the person at Google who's responsible for making sure that we fix all the code that breaks is Kripa Krishnan, who's here to tell you about what you need to do to fix your code that's going to break as a result of this. Kripa, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kripa. I'm a technical program manager at Google, and I'm here to tell you about, to worry about the concerns that we have to face and the issues that we have to face as hundreds of new TLDs enter our internet ecosystem. So let's just dive in very quickly and start looking through a series of examples, and we can see how this is actually going to play out. Taking a look at this slide, there are 3 TLDs, .fu, .photography, and .mina, Japanese. Nothing special about them, except they're all new strings, and hundreds more, if I recall correctly, close to 1,500 new TLDs are going to be entering our ecosystem. They are much longer than some of our old strings. We had a limited set of TLDs in the past, and if you look at the new TLDs, the lengths of them are quite unpredictable, And they now come in a host of brand new characters. In the past, we had very, very ASCII Roman character set very dominantly on the internet. Now we have new character sets from various languages and scripts. So just the fact that you have new strings, new lengths of strings, and new characters lends itself to a host of different issues that we need to worry about. So we're going to talk about a few of these issues. There's several more to consider. The point of my talk here is not to just tell you all the various problems that we have. I'd like to offer a few fixes, but something so you can take home with you and sort of consider as you start designing your applications if they're working with URLs or email addresses in general. So let's start talking about validation of new TLDs, or TLDs in general. Just a show of hands in the audience, how many of you have written any code to validate a URL or an email address? How many of you believe you got it right? Wow, that was a significant drop of hands. But the reason is it's complicated, it's hard, it's not a straightforward problem, and nobody builds a consistent set of rules around this. A lot of rules for validation are hard-coded, so it's very hard for two applications to actually do the same thing on the internet. So in our research, when we were trying to find issues with the way we validate code, we found several such issues, and I'll walk you through a handful of them. One of the issues that we found was validating based on the length of a TLD. For a very long time, when we had a few dozen TLDs, .museum was one of our longest TLDs, and it had just 6 characters. So a lot of validation scripts were around, hey, if the TLD is longer than 6 characters, reject it. It's no longer valid. So that obviously doesn't work in the new world because there are several new TLDs coming about, and we don't know if this is the final wave of TLDs coming about. We don't know if ICANN will come about and say, have a bunch more. So this is not a usable solution anymore. Another approach people often use is they create a whitelist in their code, and the whitelist has a list of TLDs. So if your application is using TLDs that are part of that hard-coded whitelist, then great, it all works, else it's rejected. Well, this kind of might have worked for a while because the number of TLDs we had was somewhat static. At a few dozen, so you could hard-code a whitelist for a little while, it was okay. But right now, we're looking at crazy refresh rates, right? They're talking 1,500 new TLDs. And so doing this sort of whitelist creation thing is impractical, completely not feasible, probably time for us to throw this technique out. So this is not a great idea. And finally, another type of example we've seen in hard-coding validation rules is one where you check for whether the TLD is in ASCII characters. Doesn't work anymore because we have 100 new top-level domains. 100 of the 1,500 new top-level domains are all going to be in various languages, in various scripts. And this validation method rejects several applications that should be working. So these are minor-ish in terms of the problem space I'm stating. Why does this even matter? Why is this even important? Well, there's one reason. On the internet, your email address is your primary identifier. You can sign up for a bank account if you'd like, probably with a username and a password. But if your account is getting hijacked, the bank needs to validate your email address correctly and send you a note and not a note to dev null. You need to know something's going on with your account. The internet communicates with you via email. And if different applications on the internet are validating different email addresses in different ways, failing silently in some cases, not a great experience for the user. So now what? We get from, what do we do with respect to validation? So do you actually need to validate TLDs at all? You might want to consider if it's worthwhile just not validating TLDs at all. Treat them like SLDs. Allow any sort of values to go through, unless there is a solid reason for your product to actually validate a TLD. And these reasons do exist. For example, if you take the Chrome address bar, Chrome actually likes to predetermine whether a string that someone puts into the address bar is a URL or a search term, so it can treat it accordingly. So in this manner, yes, a validation is important. And if you do have to validate in such a case, then use something more authoritative than a hard-coded list or hard-coded set of rules. Authoritative sources could be things like the Mozilla public suffix list, or you could check against DNS, for example. These are just ideas for what you could do with respect to validation. But it is worthwhile considering whether or not you actually need to validate a TLD. So we talked a little bit of validation. A subset of validation, a validation pretty much tells you whether or not an end user can work with your application or not. So now I want to show you a set of issues that confuse the end user because you're surfacing the problems with these TLDs to an end user. So we talk about a handful of display issues. So let me ask you guys a question. If you know the answer, just raise your hands. So if I were to type www.example.com in the body of something, in the body of my Gmail message, or if I type www.example.com, press space in a document, what is the expected result? Do you guys know what is supposed to happen? It's supposed to link, yeah? Ideally, it's supposed to link. In our own products, this is what we found at Google. Different products, all of these URLs in I guess, my left or right, whatever, one of them, set of URLs is absolutely correct. And they're all valid, but each application actually figures out whether they are TLD and auto-linkifies in their own way. So there's no consistency even within our own products. We found this to be a very big issue. It sounds pretty silly right now, but if you really think about it, a user copying and pasting a URL from app to app will have completely different behaviors from app to app. Seems small, but we are working very hard on trying to standardize these sorts of things and fixing this within our own products. Let's take a slightly more complicated example. So in the case where your top-level domains are made of internationalized characters, we refer to them, for the purpose of this presentation, as internationalized domain names. Internationalized domain names are domain names where any part of the domain name has something of a different script that is not a Roman character. I would like to dive into a tiny bit of detail as to how this actually works, so we can talk to you about the kinds of problems this actually surfaces to an end user. In this example, in the blue box, you've got a Russian domain name. The Russian domain name is human readable and is encoded by an encoding called Unicode. However, the internet at large doesn't, or DNS specifically, doesn't understand Unicode. And it needs to translate this Unicode into ASCII characters for us to be able to move this data through our DNS service. So for this to happen, we use an encoding called Punicode to translate between the Unicode domain name and the ASCII version. What I'm really saying is that the stuff in the blue box that says Unicode and the stuff in the yellow box that says ASCII both point to the exact same location. And the only reason the ASCII version, the XN-dash version exists is so that you can talk to the rest of the internet in the backend. So what's the problem? Here's an example. Let's say I have a friend. My friend's name is Testing IDNs, and my friend has a Russian email address. I put this person's address in my address book in contacts. Looks great. Everything's good. Now I want to send my friend an email. So I say to Testing IDNs in the to field, and if you notice, the autocomplete over there gives me the correct email address for Testing IDNs, except it translates it back to the Punicode version. So you'd see that it's the exact same email address, but now it has the XN-dash version. So to most users, these two are not the same. This is a very confusing experience. Most people don't know if they're doing a safe thing or not. This actually is quite sad. And if you were noticing, this is Google's Gmail and Google's contacts, and we thought this was highly embarrassing. So we just went ahead and we fixed it. In the next few weeks, you will actually find this launching to, or rolling out to all of your inboxes eventually. Anyway, so what actually happened here? Why are we surfacing this? This is what we did. We take this system that we use to transcribe and move stuff along the internet and present this ASCII version directly to the users. Simple fix. Just make sure you translate everything back to Unicode at client level. Every client upgrades to Unicode when presenting information to the end user, unless there is an actual reason not to. Well, this sort of, yeah, just translate everything to Unicode. If you are paying very close attention, you might notice that this actually comes with it a problem, and this is a problem in security. If I were to just show Unicode characters to my end users, we could end up with, just for the purposes of an example, something like this. Do you see a difference between www.google.com and www.google.com? These are actually quite different, even though they are virtually indistinguishable in certain fonts. In additional fonts, in a different font, you could actually see that the google.com in the second row actually has Greek characters in place of other O's that we're using in the first google.com. So it is that easy to dupe a user into using a site that they believe they are on when they're not. This is not a new problem. It exists today. However, the scope of it is much, much larger with a large number of new TLDs and the large number of IDNs we have. Some products tend to solve this by exposing the Punicode version of that, especially for IDNs. They surface the Punicode version to the user because Punicode is a fingerprint for every URL. But to an end user, if you show them a www.xn-dash sort of domain, they are actually feeling even more insecure than they were a minute ago. So this is not a great experience either. Unfortunately, we don't have a great, simple, one-line solution for this just yet. We are experimenting with a few things. We are definitely experimenting with things like warning messages to educate the user if they are using character sets or mixed character sets that they may not be aware of. So at the moment, we're playing around with this, but we don't have a straightforward solution. The point of this is there's several others. If you keep looking under the hood, there's several other issues. How do you normalize TLDs? How do you store TLDs? How do you index them as the environment changes? And the point of this is we really need to take this into consideration as you start developing code where you are using URLs or email addresses primarily. Now, we also really want to help. So in whatever way we can, we'd like to help. And to this end, we have launched a new tool in the last few hours. So, no, in the last week or two. We've been working very hard towards this tool. We've worked on a tool that will help developers use their applications and validate TLDs against their applications to make sure that there's nothing in their stack, maybe UTF-8 issues, if you're using a hard-coded whitelist, whatever, to surface these issues and tell you how the TLD actually interacts with your application. This is not particularly new. There are other such examples that do exist. However, the two big differences between this are we would like to launch this tool on pretty much every new TLD, if we can, on as many new TLDs as possible, and we would also give you the ability to test email with this same tool. So let's just dive into it. It's a simplistic thing, so let's just walk through it and see how this works. The tool's called domain test, and you would find it on several new TLDs. For example, domain test.foo, domain test.photography, domain test.mina. The canonical source for this is domain test.foo. We'll see a few more examples in a little bit. Let me walk you through an example. And for our example, let's use domain test.mina. So what I'm going to do is go to the site, domain test.mina, and domain test as the tool supports a whole host of HTTP commands. If you look at this, you will actually notice that we support a whole bunch of echo and stash commands. So you can use this for an example. So in my Chrome browser, I'm going to go ahead and type domain test.mina, and I'm going to ask my tool to echo back to me a string, and the string over here is hello world. So it's a browser. It should technically work, and if it works, everything is good. So here's what I get. I get hello world back from this URL. Great, everything is dandy. Now we need to see if this would actually work on a different Google product. So let's try something with Google+. So if I were to, by accident, sign into Ben's Google+ account, and then try to post as him, and I want to see if URLs actually work in the link box in the link field in this share box. So what I would do is I would take the exact same URL, domain test.mina, and I'm trying to echo the same thing, hello world back to me. So what you'd notice is that it would echo hello world back to me, but you'd also notice that it displays the Punicode version of domain test.mina. So you know there's a bug, you go file it, and you got to try to get it fixed. So this is sort of how this would work with your application. The second thing that we tried to do over here is that this tool also has a feature for email testing. So this is something that's a little new. And here's how we're going to try to test an email application to see if this tool works. Send an email to any mailbox at domain test.mina. Again, domain test exists on several TLDs, so I'm using domain test.mina for our example. And I'm sending a note in Gmail to say, test everything. And if you notice, many of you might have complained about this before, but Gmail actually does not work with internationalized domains. So this was also equally embarrassing. So we just went ahead and fixed that too. So in a few weeks, we will show you an example of what happens in our dev instance, but in a few weeks, you will see this roll out to all inboxes where you will be able to send and receive email to all internationalized domain names and pretty much any TLD there is. So yeah. In our dev instance, this is how this works. We would be sending a note to a mailbox at domain test.mina. You will see that the message got sent. So you have validation that the message got sent. And you will also receive a confirmation email in return saying that, to show you that both your incoming and outgoing email have actually worked. So this actually works in Gmail today. And that's pretty much it. The great thing about this is as soon as we launched this tool, we tried to ask a few registries if they would like to host domain test in the TLDs that they were responsible for. And here's what we got. Within the last couple of weeks, actually, over 126, or I think roughly 126 new TLDs now have domain test running on them. Domain test.foo is still your canonical source, thanks to Donuts, Registry, and AU Registry. And there are several more on the way. They're ready to actually host domain test. So you can go play with this now. It's live. And if you have any questions, there are ways to get to us from there. And that's pretty much it. From this point on, I'm going to hand it back to Ben to talk through the potential that we have with the new TLDs going forward.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk so we kind of gave you the big picture about lots of new top-level domains. Names on the internet are never going to be the same. We talked a bit about creating a new registrar business and what we think that means for the experience of coming online. Kripa talked about the bugs this may introduce in your code and what to do about it. I wanted to end on hopefully the high note of talking about what we think our vision for what the internet may be like with some of these new top-level domains. And I'm going to do that by talking about our plans and tell you a bit about what we're planning to do with some of those almost 100 top-level domains that I put up on a slide a few minutes ago. So the very first top-level domain that we launched, and this actually went live in December of last year, is .minna. Kripa mentioned it earlier. Minna is the Japanese word for everyone. And what was important for us about this is that the top-level domain is in hiragana, a Japanese script. This was actually the first top-level domain, the first generic top-level domain in a Japanese script. So it always struck me as kind of strange how Anglo-centric the internet was, that you have to understand these strange abbreviations of English language words in order to find sites meaningful to you, even though you might not speak English or even use a Roman alphabet. And Minna was important to us because we thought we could do an enormous amount for the readability of names on the internet with it. And this was obviously just a starter. There's going to be, as Kripa mentioned earlier, there's going to be, and if you looked at the TLD list that I put up, you'll see that there are going to be domain names in Russian, in Chinese, in Japanese, in Hebrew, in many languages coming very soon. So the internet is going to be a lot more friendly to people who don't use Roman scripts. So thinking about what we do next at Google with new top-level domains, one of the next top-level domains that we're going to launch, we haven't launched it yet, is .soy. And in this case, we're using it to mean the Spanish word for I am. And what we want is to make .soy be a top-level domain for Latinos. In America, Hispanics are one of the fastest growing groups in the country, and our goal is to make this top-level domain be known as a place where there is content particularly meaningful to Latinos. So we're going to work with site creators and businesses, content consumers, content producers to create content in .soy for Latinos. But there are more things you can do with top-level domains than create meaningfulness through readability. And there are examples of this that you're all already familiar with. If you think of .gov or .edu, these are examples of top-level domains where there are restrictions to who can register in those top-level domains, and those restrictions actually provide a service to the registrants in those top-level domains and provide a lot of value to the users, people visiting URLs and using sites and interacting with sites in these top-level domains. Obviously, if you go to a .edu site, you know it's an institute of education. If you go to a .gov site, you know it must be a United States-based government agency of some sort. And with that same kind of motivation in mind, we are planning on launching .esq. Imagine a top-level domain where every registrant has been verified to be a lawyer. We think that this can help. Imagine jackdonaghy.esq, for example, would mean Jack Donaghy the lawyer and not Jack Donaghy the NBC executive, if you want to go back to my 30 Rock example earlier. We think this is going to be really, really helpful to people, lawyers, and helping them provide names that provide more meaning, but also obviously to people who are using these domains because of the association that the top-level domain will provide. So we've talked about using the top-level domain to provide more meaning in language, in script, in restriction. One of the other things that we're planning on doing is creating actual features within the top-level domain that provide special meaning to the community of users. We want, one of the places we're going to do this, the first place where we're going to do this, is in .foo. .foo is going to be a top-level domain for people like you, developers, people who care about code. We're planning on launching features like being able to, requiring that every site in .foo, there be a well-known address that gets you to the source code repository for that site. We're thinking about doing things like making .foo provide very, very simple click to publish to a cloud hoster features, for example. These are things that we can do by actually building features into the top-level domain that didn't exist before, and we think that we can actually then create new kinds of meaning for important communities with the top-level domain in this way. So that's just a hint of what we're planning. If I would go back to the very beginning of the talk, the thing that I think I'd like you all to walk away with is that we're at the start of a new phase in the internet. names on the internet are never going to be the same. They've only just begun, these new names, and we don't really know how it's all going to play out. But we are going to be there, absolutely, and I know that we're going to look back in 10 years and think about how different the internet was in an era when there were only a handful of top-level domains. So, thanks for listening. Oh, right, free domain registration. I promised you all free domain registration or a free domain transfer. On July 9th, expect an email with an invitation code, which you can use to get your free domain registration or transfer. I should mention that Google Domains, our registrar, is only available in the US. We're working on adding other countries as quickly as we can. There you have it. And thank you very much. And we'll take Q&A. Are there questions?
Do you want them to?
Yes, I have a question. Is Google Domains going to also do the DNS part, or?
Yeah, so Google Domains can host your DNS service, yes.
Is it going to be just a simple one, or something that's fully capable of handling subdomains and all that?
Yes, it will be capable of handling subdomains. We'll give you something like 100 subdomains for free bundled in.
Oh, great.
We'll also give you domain redirects to a whole bunch of other features like that. Yes.
Folks were really excited or disappointed with GoDaddy's response to SOPA and all that good stuff, and it's getting really political as domain ownership expands, and now there's no more TLDs. Has Google taken a position how they're going to deal with the political environment for domains and censorship and stuff like that?
We don't have any positions we're ready to talk about on those matters now.
I just saw on your site that you are providing domain aliases, email aliases, and
Yes.
forwarding it to Gmail. So how does it work when I want to mail with that alias? There was no details on that.
Yeah.
Like say if I have my sandeep@google.com or whatever, that's my name, and you are forwarding that mail to, I think, your personal Gmail address.
For which one?
Right, and your question is, yes, that's the intent of the feature.
How do I reply from that alias domain name itself?
You would be, I think you're, I might be answering this wrong. If I am, please let me know.
Okay.
I think you are looking to send an email to any mailbox, for example, test@domaintest. Whatever TLD you might want.
I think
on
yes.
your site, the description says, if I have sandeep@google.com, it gets forwarded to your personal Gmail address, whatever
see,
it
for
is.
this thing.
And then if I want to mail back with the sandeep@google.com itself, how do I do that?
In general, you can set up domain email aliases from Gmail. As long as you can receive email at the alias, it gets
Yes, and we're not restricting that to be just be Gmail, right? But work with your mail agent or your mail provider to change the settings to allow you to send mail to come from that domain. But each mail product has a way, generally has ways of doing that, but it's specific to the product.
Maybe just a feedback, like if you can just give at least one Google Apps ID with that, that would have been a much more better way than making an alias and making it complicated. Thank you.
You seem to be painting a very rosy picture about the domain names. What are your, do you have any concerns about cyber squatting, about people who are going to be reserving the exact same name across 150, 200, 300 TLDs? Because we're seeing that now. It's not helping the name exhaustion problem. It's increasing the confusion, and the common perception is that the only people that are benefiting from the new TLDs are the registrars, and you're a registrar.
Right, so our registrar and our registry are separate business entities. We're not doing this to enrich one or the other. I think that we've certainly looked at, I think we see a bunch of the same problems that you see and that you've pointed out. And one of the things that we think is a great opportunity with new top-level domains is to create rules that prevent a bunch of kind of the negative attributes that have taken place around top-level domains. The specifics, I think, will vary based on the top-level domain and what we try to do. But I think it's our hope that there's an opportunity to get a clean start here and try to prevent some of the things in the new top-level domains that are accepted practices in the old ones. Since I didn't even see that there was a line back there, I'll take another question from the back mic, and then I'll move to the group in front.
Hi, I'm wondering about search engine optimization. So if I have a website and it's website.com, and I have resources for programmers on that website, website.com/programmers, that programmers part of the site is benefiting from website.com being in existence for 10 years in the search engine. So if I follow the practice you proposed and make website.foo and move my resources for programmers there, how can I guarantee that I'm still going to get good search engine rankings?
So, gosh, I'm not a search engine optimization expert, but I think at Google we pride ourselves on helping people find things on the internet and making search work, and we're really committed to making sure that Google search works fantastically well across the whole 1,400 new top-level domains that are going to be coming out. Beyond that, I can't kind of offer you any more specifics. I think we're all going to see how this plays out as these domains get adopted and used. But Google search isn't about favoring one top-level domain or the other. It's about allowing people to find things on the internet. We hope that the new top-level domains makes those things more memorable, makes them more meaningful, gives people better naming choices. But we don't think that that is going to, we don't intend to have that have a negative effect on searchability.
Thank you.
Chime in here for a second. Also, one thing we've heard from other operators of new top-level domains is that they're recommending people with your exact situation to use the new domain as a redirect. So you get the namespace advantages, but you still have your canonical source under your
I mean, it's if you're working in new top-level domains now, you're a bit of a pioneer. And I think we're all going to, in a matter of years, we'll all look back and realize, oh, that was a great practice, and that was something that maybe didn't work out so well, and so on. These are early days for these new top-level domains. Who, in 1985, and some of us, I don't think were even alive in 1985, but in 1985, who could have predicted that .com would be essentially all used up, right? Sir?
Yeah, so are you guys predicting there's going to be a huge adoption rate with the new top-level domains? Because I know even in the existing market, well, let's leave out the 1500 for now. People will often consider having a name, foo.com, foo.net, and they'll think about foo.biz, foo.org, but anything besides that, there's just, I'm going to think of a new name. Do you think this is something that's going to change within the next 5 years, or are we looking at adoption hopefully within 20?
I'm not a guy who's good at predicting the future. I wouldn't, don't ask me for stock market tips or things like that. I want to turn the question around a little bit and say that, what happens with these new top-level domains is dependent on people like you who create sites, who build apps, who, who through the work that you do guide how people use the internet. No one actually knows what or when or how this will take up. I think there's a huge qualitative difference between the 1,400, 1,500 new top-level domains and the 15 that were added to the GTLD pool in 2000, 2004. You can't even compare them as being similar, right? So I wouldn't want to make any kind of predictions about timeframes, but I do think that people like you and people like us will be doing an awful lot to try to figure out how to make these as meaningful as possible.
Okay. Could you ask another question onto that? Is Google Domains or Google Ads itself going to do anything to accelerate every country having a CCTLD?
We have no specific plans around that as an objective now. Google Domains is still in beta. We're really focused now on completing our feature set and going to GA as we get feedback from you all over the next several months.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi there. Question about privacy service. Do you provide that only in the US or for everybody outside? And if somebody comes from, say, Utopia and is going to abuse a domain that has privacy from you on it, what will you do with such a domain?
So privacy is at the WHOIS level, so that's so definitely, definitely any privacy that's not WHOIS. That's a question for Google Domains, and I'm from the registry team, but I can tell you that at the registry, privacy is global at the WHOIS level. Generally, abuse is also a registry issue. You can go, there are abuse stopping ways of going to a registry and saying that a domain is abusive, and we support for our TLDs the standard ones. And if you had an abusive domain on any other TLD, you would go to the registry for that TLD for that purpose.
So that means that Google Domains is going to the other registries to ask to take these domain names down.
Why don't we, so it's a great question. It's one that we're not prepared to fully answer right now. Brent, do you have any? So Brent, who manages the team that built Google Domains, is here. Do you have something to add? I have a mic here for you if you.
So thank you all for coming. So on the Whois, it will work for all countries. It's provided by a partner that does it actually out of New Zealand, so it's not a service that's going to be US only. And then about the abuse. Abuse is handled, so for every domain, it's a requirement of ICANN that we verify email address. So we do know that there's a way to contact the owner of the site, and that has to be checked every single year so that we make sure that that's always up to date. If there's an abusive situation, we can always use then the email to contact them. And abuse can be, you can inform us of abuse. Every registrar has its own abuse email or abuse contact, either phone number or email. You can get that off the Whois. You can also contact the registries, or you can contact ICANN. Abuse is a big problem, and we try to make sure that that doesn't happen. So there's multiple ways to handle that.
Okay. Final question is, which ccTLDs do you add on Google Domains? Is there any?
No, why don't you take it?
Okay, so we're working to get a number of ccTLDs out. We currently only have 2, but we're working on increasing that pretty significantly. So I don't know which ones we're actually going to launch the GA with.
It's our goal to support as many as possible. There's only a few that we've got right now, but there's a lot of legwork to sign up with more ccTLDs. We're doing it.
Yep. Thanks.
All right, this is the last question, and then we have to move on.
You'd mentioned that you're not good at forecasting, but just one more question around that line. You see that right now everybody understands any web address to be just an address. It might be, if it is a edu, you just understand that it is a university, but still, it's still just a link to go to a place to look at content. Obviously, with the stuff that you're bringing in, you're saying .foo will be for developers, and on top of that, there is some added feature set that's going to go with it. So how do you see that kind of phase out? It's kind of like you're choosing your horses in the game that might pan out in the future. So do you see that to be kind of a fragmented version of what things might be than when compared to right now, which is just an address right now?
So I think the goal is to create new kinds of meaning for a broad set of constituencies, meaning specific to those constituencies for them in ways that the internet never was able to do before. You know, what I'd like to see happen with .foo, for example, is I'm imagining a top-level domain where, you know, people post their hobby projects, for example, or where companies that are all open source, you know, in their software development practices use those, and you immediately know, oh, .foo. If I'm curious about how that website works, there's a well-known URL that I can go to find their source code repository. And like, you know, there are things like this that exist today. People think about, you know, how they use existing source code repositories, for example, or how important it is for some classes of developers to post links to their source code. I think that in the case of .foo, I think we can do all sorts of things where we accelerate that and we create kind of new features and new meaning and new value for people in the top-level domain name itself that they were only able to achieve otherwise. I think it kind of all will come together for them through those top-level domains. So, you know, maybe, hopefully, in a few years, you say, oh, a .foo URL. Well, I know that it's posted by someone who cares about code and who cares that other people be able to see how they built their website or how they built their app and how the code works. And I think that there'll probably, hopefully, be a lot more of that on the internet in several years. That's certainly our hope. I don't know if that's the best I can do to answer your question. We have to end now. The next team is coming in for their talk. So thank you all very much.